Yes, you can get rich with online video, but not through YouTube. And Paramount's new business model makes theater owners and consumers happy. Whoever would have imagined that that's possible?
Not me.
This is episode 23 of Media Unplugged, the podcast that continues to go behind the spin to reveal what's really happening in media.
Media Unplugged with Tom Asacker and Mark Ramsey.
A big welcome to Media Unplugged. I am Mark Ramsey.
And I'm Tom Asacker.
Yes, you can get rich with online video, Tom, but not through YouTube.
All right, it's good to know. How do we do it?
That is the question, isn't it? And someone has broken some fresh ground on this. I am happy to report that Comic Book Girl 19, you know Comic Book Girl 19, right?
No, I don't know her.
Comic Book Girl 19 is a comic enthusiast who is a YouTube fixture. She has upwards of 370,000 subscribers and tens of millions of views on YouTube. She has what this article in Tube Filter describes as an articulate and insightful pop culture commentary. What this article does not say is that she's young, she's hot, she's got pink hair, she's got tattoos, she looks a little goth.
Is she 19? Why 19? Are there 18 other ones?
She, like so many of us, at one point in her life, she was 19.
Oh, that's when, okay, I got you.
So here's the story. Apparently, she decided to produce more in-depth, longer-form videos, but those videos she put out on Vimeo On Demand. Vimeo On Demand has, as the name describes, an on-demand service for a couple of dollars. You can purchase the right to watch one of these videos. And here's the interesting thing from this article. Our top-selling Vimeo On Demand project, called The Epic History of the House Baratheon, we know what that's about, made as much money as a year of advertising revenue on our whole YouTube channel. It's a small audience buying it, and our views are far less than on YouTube, obviously. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense.
I like that. That's the title of my next book.
If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. Now, what's interesting about this is, and this isn't really surprising, but clearly this is a woman whose star was made by YouTube and continues to be on YouTube, and she's essentially using the free distribution of YouTube as kind of a funnel into the more hardcore fan-based distribution that allows her to monetize through Vimeo On Demand. But what's amazing to me is it's such a great statement for the importance of fans, because it's the fans that spend the big $2, and the idea that she can, with millions, Tom, of views on YouTube, tens of millions, with 370,000 subscribers. She has more subscribers than many radio stations in a large market have listeners at any given point in time.
Yep.
She has more subscribers, and yet one video on Vimeo On Demand can earn more than a year of YouTube advertising. I mean, I find that fundamentally stunning, don't you?
Yeah, listen, so ad revenue or paid subscriptions or some combination of the two. It sounds like what every newspaper, magazine, everybody's trying to figure this out. And so for kicks, I started doing some numbers. So let's do some numbers. So Comic Book Girl, you said a little more than 370,000 YouTube subscribers. Now, it's funny. I mean, I'm sitting here saying a little more than, I think it's like today, 3,000 more than 370,000. And wouldn't we love to have that rounding error as like our number of subscribers? Anyway, I digress. So one of her most recent YouTube videos, I looked it up, this episode called Epic History X-Men, which is a little over an hour long, has 124,000 views on YouTube. So let's assume that everyone watches enough of the pre-roll ad to count it as an ad view, just for kicks. So at around $7 per thousand for ad views, she has made around $900 in gross ad revenue through YouTube for that episode. So now let's assume that some rabid fans of that 370,000 YouTubers head over to Vimeo and they pay... And right now she's charging $3.99 for the premium video. Now, it's funny because I said premium. What the hell is premium video? And I looked it up, and she says, this is what she says it means. This was in an interview, which is kind of funny, I think. She said, the premium version, we do very in-depth videos that require me to do a lot of reading and thinking. I have to buy a lot of comic books and movies. So I said, okay. That's a good one. So
Wait a minute. That's going to be the title of my next book. A lot of reading and thinking.
I love that. So let's go back to the numbers. So if only 1% of those YouTube fans purchase the premium version on Vimeo, that comes to about $15,000 for that episode. Take away the transaction cost, and I think Vimeo takes a 10% cut. Anyway, she's grossed over $13,000 on that paid platform, right? So what are we proving? So okay, so I was thought about this. I said, what did you just prove by doing these numbers? And I said, well, really nothing, or maybe a couple of things. One, like you said, use the free platforms like YouTube, Facebook, whatever, to build an audience. Then move the rabid fans to a paid platform for premium content. Content, like you said, that requires you to do like a lot of reading and thinking or something or anything like that. I mean, really, 13 grand for an episode where she talks about X-Men.
It's funny because that kind of thinking is analogous to what Gary Vaynerchuk said to me a long time ago when I said, Gary, this is when he was doing his Wine Library TV thing. And I said, you're doing this Wine Library TV. It's not being monetized per se. And he said, no, that's right. It's monetized on the second level is what he said. So the more fans I get, the more attention I get for those videos, the more people are interested in the stuff that I'm catering, that I'm trafficking in, the more they're interested in wines, the more likely they are to buy the wines. So the monetization is all on the second level. Kevin Smith said the same thing to me. He doesn't make money so much from doing his podcast, a little bit, but not a lot. However, it allows him to sell out every show he does.
Right.
That podcast draws people to the theater. Some of the podcasts are live performances. You're paying a fee for the live performances. There are a couple hundred seats. He does one of his up at the Improv where you and I were. And there are, 200, 250 seats in the Improv. He sells that thing out. That's a good day, even for Kevin Smith. So there's a lot of this, I think, and it begins with two things. It begins with the talent and the content that's compelling,
right,
and then the fans that subscribe or are interested in that content that are willing to lay out cash money for it.
That's right.
And the beauty of YouTube is that it's such a huge, huge filter that even when you start off with a number in the tens of millions, you get down to a small number, but even as you indicate, that small number is big enough to make you a lot of money on Vimeo On Demand, isn't it?
No, listen, you're absolutely right. This is this is like the Wild West now for content creation. Talk about South Park, that announcement, which blows my mind. What tell us, Hulu. How much money? I blew my mind when I read this.
It's $192 million over 5 years, and the deal is that South Park gets another 5 years of life. Hulu is paying Viacom, which produces the show along with the creative team of Matt Stone and Trey Parker, $192 million over the 5 years. Now, this is one of the first instances where digital monies will underwrite current production costs. That's the significance of it. And what's fascinating about this is not only does it testify to the power of original content and name brand premium content like we were talking about before, but listen to what Matt Stone said. I don't know if you heard this, but this is how he described kind of his relationship with the kind of freewheeling, content should be free attitude of, associated with Silicon Valley. He said, frankly, in the past, I haven't much liked dealing with the people from Silicon Valley. I don't like our stuff being talked about as content.
Oh, God.
Spoons are metal and guns are metal, but they're not the same thing. We don't make content. We make television, and that's now what digital understands it has to pay for.
I like that. I don't know if the metaphors are appropriate, but I understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, the metaphors are kind of dumb, but
But so is the South Park show's kind of dumb. So,
but again, it speaks to the importance of content. So and the people behind it, name brand content, premium content, distribute it where you can cash
Mark,
in. Right?
We said it a million times. Content platform. Make the content, perfect the platform. One of our listeners, Dimitri, pointed out a tweet that made it glaringly clear about what you can do with platforms as well. In it said that Uber is the largest taxi company in the world, but owns no vehicles. Facebook is the world's most popular media owner and creates no content. Alibaba is the world's largest retailer, but has no inventory. And Airbnb is the world's largest accommodation provider and owns no real estate. Well, Vimeo is giving people a platform to put on content, and they're taking 10%. I mean, the platforms, content. Make a decision. Try both if you want, but there is a lot of money to be made if you can make it happen.
Try both if you can.
Exactly.
And speaking of an entity that has leverage in both content and platforms, Paramount. Paramount's new business model makes theater owners and consumers happy. This is from a piece from The Wrap, and the title is Paramount Threatens Release Windows with Flexible Distribution Plan for Next Paranormal Activity Movie. Now, Tom, if you're like me, you are on pins and needles awaiting the next Paranormal Activity movie.
But you like horror movies and things like that, so
I do. But like all other horror movie fans, I am not on pins and needles awaiting it. So let's just consider this an experiment at relatively low risk. But here's what it is. Under the agreement, Paramount titles Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension, which is the next movie, and Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. Two of their biggest pictures of the year? I don't think so. But they will be given a wide release this fall with a comprehensive marketing plan with digital home entertainment purchase available 17 days after the film dips below 300 domestic theaters, which I predict will happen
pretty fast.
Pretty fast, okay? So the idea here is that it's going to be on demand basically 2.5 weeks from the time it opens in theaters, which is unheard of. Usually that's anywhere from, I think it's about 60 days, right, if I remember right. AMC and Cineplex and other exhibitors, here's the other catch, will receive a percentage of any of the studio's digital revenue for the period of digital availability through 90 days from initial U.S. theatrical release, at which time it will disappear into the ether, never to be seen again, with each exhibitor's share proportional to its theatrical gross market share. So essentially, the theater owners who are saying, wait a minute, you're going to pull this movie out of the theaters, I should say, you're going to make it available on demand only 17 days after it opens in theaters. Why should we put it in theaters? The answer is, when it goes on demand,
you get a cut.
You get a cut. You get a piece of the action too. And look, the fact of the matter is, Tom, that theater, as much as I think theaters are kind of an outmoded concept, they are kind of the first, the launching platform for attention and consumption for all the movies that are out there today. That's where every other element of the pipeline begins there with the theater opening. So they are important pieces of the ecosystem. So the idea is, of course, they should share in the fruits of these movies that they help launch. This seems like a really equitable thing to me, and it seems like an example of things to come, no?
Well, I don't think anyone's doing anything out of the goodness of their heart because it's equitable or anything. I mean, I love the headline, right? Paramount threatens the release window. I don't know. It's kind of militant. Like the release window is some kind of entity doing battle with Paramount, right? I mean, it's an industry convention, periods of exclusive availability on platforms in order to maximize profits for all players, whatever. I mean, why didn't we ever see a headline that said Southwest Airlines threatens baggage fees? I mean, we never saw that because it doesn't make sense. Neither does this. So what are they doing? You're right. It's a test. There's an industry player that's stepping outside of the norm of that industry, the box that defines how things are supposed to be done, and they're attempting to redefine value for all parties, while boosting the revenue of two low-budget horror movies. Now, why redefine the value equation? I'll tell you why. They're scared. Digital is threatening the traditional model. They're trying to get ahead of this thing and jump on it before movies go the way of the music industry. I mean, I think that's what's going on here. They're saying we have to come up with a model that makes sense. or
Yes.
something's going to happen to disrupt us.
Yes, well, we're already seeing I mean, look, the Vimeo On Demand is a perfect example. I mean, there are movies right now. I don't know if Vimeo On Demand is the platform, but there are movies, documentaries, and other movies which open on platforms like Vimeo On Demand.
Right.
They skip theatrical distribution altogether, and as you indicate, you can get a relatively small number of people buying your movie and do just fine if it's a small movie. So I think this is a case where the risk is relatively low. These are two movies which didn't have bright prospects to begin with. They're two movies which are not expensive to begin with. And it could be argued, and it might be so, that there's actually more money to be made. In other words, the pot may be bigger by assuring the upfront theatrical release, distribution,
Right.
and then giving away a piece of that action than it would be if they waited 60 days and then, people could get it on demand at that time. So I think this is an experiment which will allow them to better model what happens when the distribution window shrinks.
That's it.
And they share a piece of the pie with their partners.
That's what's going on. And the fact that the media refer to it, the deal as a quote-unquote surprise agreement with AMC Theaters and Cineplex. Yeah, okay, if that's true, then surprise agreements are going to quickly become the new normal. Because every media brand, every brand that I know of is trying to figure out how to partner to attract attention, add unique value to their audiences, make some money. It's a natural strategy in a world busting at the seams with comparable products and services. I mean, I read last week that Facebook is right now in negotiations with major record companies looking for licensing deals so they can insert music videos into Facebook's users' feeds. Mm-hmm. Right? So, surprise, YouTube. Here comes Facebook. Surprise.
Yeah, I think the thinking here is analogous to what a music label does with an artist, right? They do a 360-degree deal, which means everything that artist touches, a piece of it goes back to the label because the label helps promote the artist. Well, it's totally analogous with movie theaters. Movie theaters help launch franchises. They help launch successful movies. Without the movie theater launch, the movie is unlikely to be successful. I can't think of a single example where that isn't so.
Right.
So why shouldn't the theaters
I agree.
touch every till, just like everybody else?
Yeah, well, this is what's going to come in the future. You know that, and I know this.
That is exactly right. You are listening to Media Unplugged with Tom Asacker and Mark Ramsey. Tom, it's time for rants and raves. Do you want to go first today?
I think I go first every time. All right, I'll go
I think
first.
last time I went first, and I regretted it.
All right,
go.
fine. I'll go first. So I've got a rant. But for everyone, you usually always rant, but sometimes I rave. But for everyone else, it's probably a rave. But it's a rant for me because here I am working on a new book about how the stories we tell ourselves create the lives we live, right? And I had this crazy goal going into this book that maybe, just maybe in some small way, I could help people deal with life's most puzzling question, which is, what is the meaning of all this madness? So I'm doing some research, and what do I discover? Google has made a computer program, a chatbot, that will debate the meaning of life with you. Now no one has to buy my book. Google will help them arrive at the answers. And on top of that, get this, they're using precisely the same philosophical approach that I'm using, which is based on stories. They taught their computer, this massive neural network program, how to debate the meaning of life by analyzing old movie dialogue. They went into an enormous collection of movies, and they had this computer just go listen to all this dialogue to figure out how to debate the meaning of life. Now, this is a proof of concept. I've got some time, but like every other entrepreneur and creative out there, I have to hurry up because AI is going to render me obsolete. Or I was thinking, maybe I can relax and I can hope that thing they created analyzed every movie. And if so, that would include things like Animal House, where Blutarsky, he says, "What was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor?" Hell no. So if they listen to movies like that, then that computer's going to be as screwed up as everybody else, and I still have a chance. That's my rant. That's
awesome. And what the thing about what you just said that made the biggest impression on me was that I went immediately to your book, and in my mind, I'm going back to the index in the back, whatever it is, and I'm looking for my name before I do anything. Okay?
That's what everybody
look
does.
For my name. I'm going to look for my name.
It'll be in there.
All right, that's awesome. I have a couple. One is a rant. The other is kind of an observation. I'm going to start with the rant first, and I'm going to surprise you with the observation. The rant. Now, did you know, well, let me ask it a different way.
Okay.
Who owns Spotify, Tom?
I don't know.
Well, of course, the founder of Spotify, Daniel Ek, and some other executives there, and a bunch of investors. Do you know who else owns Spotify? Do you know who else owns 17% of Spotify?
I do not know. Apple.
Spotify, the entity that's abhorred by so many artists, that's getting a lot of grief from artists now, that labels
It
are
must be an artist.
pitched battle against. Actually, it's a bunch of music labels, Tom. In fact, music labels own 17% of Spotify.
Another conspiracy thing.
Many people don't know this. And here's an article from Hollywood Reporter, because some people are challenging Sony in particular because of that relationship. So here's the title of the article. Sony asserts right to structured deal with Spotify even if results disfavor artists.
Oh, my. Isn't that interesting?
So here's what Sony says. Sony cites the judge and says it may act in its own interest in a way that may incidentally lessen the other party's anticipated fruits from the contract, which is a nice way of saying we're going to screw the artists. It's really, really interesting because the gist of this thing is that because they own a piece of Spotify, and Spotify has to negotiate with labels for licensing rates, essentially several labels get to negotiate with themselves. And who's left out of this negotiation? Our friends, the artists.
The artists again.
That's right. Think about that again, folks, when you talk about how horrible Spotify is and how great the labels are. Second, I have an observation, and this is based on something you sent me earlier this week. You didn't know I was going to talk about this.
Don't get me in trouble.
I'm not going to get you in trouble, I swear. You sent me a piece from Seth Godin. Now, you and I both know Seth. Seth is an awesome guy. We have the greatest regard for Seth, and this piece is no exception. But the piece was a clip from the Star Wars presentation at Comic-Con, and Seth was making a point to say that J.J. Abrams, who's directing the movie, was telling, not showing, how great it was that he was telling, not showing, that he wasn't actually showing any clips from the movie. He was telling a story about a movie. Meanwhile, here was this big YouTube thing, and it was essentially an insider's take on behind the scenes of the movie. There were no clips from the movie, but it was all insider stuff. And your point was, well, isn't this the essence of showing, not telling, when you're showing a several-minute featurette, essentially, about the movie?
Right.
And I thought about that. And here's what I have since learned, and this is what you did not know.
Oh.
Seth thought that JJ was so clever, such a great storyteller, such a great dramatist, so smart. What he didn't realize was this. Lucasfilm, as you may know, is owned by Disney. Lucasfilm, the producers of Star Wars. Marvel is owned also by Disney. It turns out that Marvel was not represented at Comic-Con this year for movies. They were represented for television, but not for movies. None of the Marvel comic book superhero movies were represented at Comic-Con. Why is that? Well, could it be that Disney has an event coming up soon called D23? It's an expo that they do every single year, which is essentially a fan expo, which sounds a lot like
Comic-Con.
Comic-Con. And that's happening up in the LA area coming up soon. So is it a coincidence that Marvel has withheld all their movie, superhero movie stuff from Comic-Con? Is it a coincidence that Lucasfilm withheld actual scenes from Star Wars from Comic-Con? What do you want to bet that real-life scenes from Star Wars show up at D23, Tom? What do you want to bet the real-life scenes from Marvel superheroes show up at D23?
You live in a world of conspiracy theories, don't you?
That's right. In other words, this was not the dramatic artistry of J.J. Abrams. This was not his ability to tell a better story.
Figure out how to make this happen.
This is mommy and daddy say, I can't stay up late. So I'm going to have to work with what I have. So a very interesting observation. So it's just not only was, I think, Seth wrong about his assessment, but he was completely missing the truth of the story, which is that JJ was showing all he had and all he was allowed to show.
But he did a good job doing it.
He did a great job
There you
doing
go.
it, but let's not give him more credit than he deserves,
right.
although he does deserve a lot. That's Media Unplugged for this week. Please remember to subscribe to us at iTunes or on Stitcher, and while you're there, please rate the show. It helps other folks discover us. You can also catch us at SoundCloud, Podcast One, Radio Inc., Media Biz Bloggers, and Net News Check, and one of these days, Huffington Post. We got to work on that, Tom. You can follow Tom on Twitter at Tom Asacker and Mark at Mark Ramsey Media. Send us your questions and comments using hashtag Media Unplugged. If there's a media topic you want us to cover, tweet us. You can read the show notes and share the show at our website, MediaUnplugged.net. Special thanks to our producer, Jeff Schmidt, exciting audio for media. You can find him at jeff-schmidt.com. For Tom Asacker, I'm Mark Ramsey. Thank you for listening.